All right, this is the video that goes with lesson 2.4 using Desmos. The last couple of lessons we've been looking at graphing equations of lines, slope-intercept form, and standard form. So first of all, we're just going to kick off with a few reminders from the first few lessons. Horizontal and vertical lines, I want you thinking about these words hoi and vux. The middle letters will tell you the slope. So horizontal is zero slope and vertical is undefined slope. And if we're writing the equation for a horizontal line, it'd be y equals a number. Or for our vertical lines, it would be x equals a number. So the slope of the line pictured here, we can see that this is a vertical line. So I'm thinking VUX, and the U is to remind me that this is undefined. Similarly, for my horizontal line, I'm thinking of the word HOY. So 0 would be the middle of that. It looks like an O, but O for 0 within HOY would tell us the slope of a horizontal line. This time I've put lots of dots on here rather than just two, because sometimes they can do that and that can actually confuse people. Now, it doesn't matter which dots you pick, but the closer they are together, the less counting you'll have to do. First of all, you can see that this is going downwards, so we know this should be negative slope straight away. So I'm going to start here, and I can see I go down 2 and across 1. So that would give me a total of -2. -1/2 would be going down 1 and then across 2 squares, which you can see is certainly not happening in this picture. For this one here, I'm going to go up 2 squares and right 3 squares. So slope really is about counting, but certainly noticing for lines that are going upwards, I'm going to only choose positive slope. You can make some good choices here. What is the slope of y equals 7 minus 2x? So our equations that start with y equals, the number in front of the x tells us the slope. So it would be -2. The other number, the 7, that just tells you your y-intercept where you start from on the graph. The number in front of the x, now there isn't a number, so it's very tempting to want to pick 0 here. But remember, x is 1x, but we never actually write down the 1, so the slope would be 1. Y equals 2. This is actually the same question that we had earlier over here. When those single letters come up, we've got to remember that word hoi. So the middle letter of hoi is O or 0. And for x equals 5, just one letter again. So I'm thinking of VUX, which will give me the U for undefined. And then the questions we were looking at last lesson, if they don't start with y equals, we want to make them start with y equals. So if we divide each term by 5, then it would start with y equals. And 15x divided by 5 would be 3x. If you did 20 divided by 5, you'd get 4, but that's the intercept, which is not what this question is. Certainly, we want to avoid that answer 15. It is the number in front of the x, but this does not start with y equals. And finding the slope between points, I went ahead and labeled the points already and wrote down the formula. This is something you need to make sure you're starting to learn. So y2 minus y1, 9 take away 3 is 6. 1 take away -1 is 2. And 6 divided by 2 is 3. And then people just had to pause while they were waiting. Just a recap of what we did in previous lessons. So when we're graphing, that number without the x, that tells us our y-intercept, where we start from here. And then the other number, our slope, tells us how many squares we count. So 2/3 means I rise 2 squares, and then I run 3 squares, and then we can just join the line through them. Notice there is nothing at the end here, so that actually means that we start from 0. And our slope is -1/4, which means we go down 1 and then across 4, and then you can join those points up. 2x minus 3 means we're going to start from -3. That's our number without the x. And then a slope of 2, if it's not a fraction, you should make it into a fraction like this, 2/1. So we go up 2 and across 1. And you can do it more than once if you want to find other points that lie on the line. Same thing we had earlier. There's nothing at the end of this one at all. There's nothing, no number at the end, which means it must go through 0. -x means -1x, and we can put that over 1 as well to make it into a fraction. So -1 means I go down 1, and if it is that single number, the run is always going to be 1, and you can do it as many times as you need to get those points. So last lesson, we started with nice ones where we just have to move the x to the other side. So once they start with y equals, then we know we can actually start drawing these graphs like we just did. And if they get slightly more complicated, we should always try and bring our x's to the other side first by doing the opposites, just be careful here. 24 minus 12x is not 12x. It's just 24 minus 12x. It's kind of a trick question. You can't simplify because one's a number and one is an x. And then divide by 4, because that's the opposite times in by 4, and do it for each of the terms. So 24 divided by 4 is 6, and negative 12 divided by 4 is negative 3. So if we were graphing this, I would start at 6, the number without the x, and then the slope would be negative 3. I would know to put it over 1, so I would go down 3, right 1 as I'm graphing. Now, the link from last time into this time, and it shouldn't actually say your turn here, kind of, we're kind of doing these ones together, is matching up questions. Now, I'm starting to use this tool called Desmos. I know we've been using Desmos just as a general tool, but really it's the name of the calculator, probably more than anything else. So I'm going to, let me just quickly move this up out of the way here. There we go. And I'm going to focus on these here. So these are really my answers. And I've got to figure out, is this graph the same as any of these? Now, we can certainly do what we did in the last lesson, but we can also use Desmos to help us as well. Now, when I click on the open circle, it will actually draw the line for us. Now, you can clearly see these are not the same graphs. So I'm going to look at the next graph instead to see if that one looks better. I can see that one's different as well. And I can see the third one's different. But notice what happens when I click on the fourth one. You can see that it draws over the top of the other one. So that can confirm that these two are actually the same answer. So Desmos is a really powerful tool for actually making those connections between which is standard form and which is slope-intercept form. If it was an open-ended question, you had to type in the answer, then that would not help you. But it is a good way of checking your answer as well. Now, from this, we can also check other things as well, such as slope. We can check x-intercepts. We can check y-intercepts. So if it asks us what is the x-intercept, we can just go ahead and look at the graph. And if you actually click on the intercept, it will actually tell you what the intercept is. So the intercept is 3. So for the purpose of this, this is not really a multiple choice question, but you could click on the 3, and you can see that it goes through the 3, and that would confirm that the x-intercept is 3. Normally, you would just actually type this in, and then you would actually look at the answers and then just pick it from there. What is the slope for this one? Now, I got to count squares. If possible, you'd want to try and use the x and the y intercept. So for this one, I would go down 6, and then I would go right 3. And negative 6 divided by 3 is negative 2, and then I would pick that answer. Now, I typed in some things that have similar slopes here. Remember, slope has the x next to it. So I just said negative 2x. And hopefully you can see these have the same sorts of slopes here. Whereas if I click on other ones, first of all, we should notice it's negative slope as well. So I kind of should have known it's not 6x really. And you can see that this slope is way steeper than this one as well. And that last one I just typed in was positive slope anyway, so it clearly wasn't that answer either. So you can actually type these in as well if you want to confirm that, or you can just do the counting of the squares. I could also just have done it from here, down 2, across 1, and negative 2 over 1 is negative 2. So I could have figured out the slope there as well. Now for the x-intercept, when we click on it this time, we actually get a decimal. So they're not quite so easy to tell. Now, if these were my multiple choice answers, if I type them into Desmos, look what actually happens. It actually changes them into decimals for us. Make sure you pick the one that has the negative sign as well. So you can actually pick negative 4/3, and that would indeed be the correct answer. What is the slope? Same thing. I can do this by counting squares. I can see it goes through this square here. So I could go up 1, 2, 3, and I could go across 2. So it would actually be this bottom one, and you can see that has the same slope on here. Now, if you were checking other ones, you should certainly ignore the ones that have negative slope because you know they're going to be wrong. And one that has a slope of 3 means that you go up 3 and across 1. And you can see that that's not on the line. So we can actually use some common sense to help us while we're actually doing those questions. Now, some of those questions from the warm-up, if you actually found them difficult, you can actually use Desmos to help you here as well. So y equals negative 2. If you've forgotten what that looks like, you can actually type it in and it will draw it for you. Oh, there's my horizontal line. And therefore, you could actually fill in what the answer was going to be for this question, which would be 0. Hoy, H-O-Y, and then you can use that to help you. Or where it says x equals negative 5, you can just type in the equation. And then with a picture, hopefully this will be more obvious. There's your vertical line. So I'm thinking of the word flux U is in the middle, which would tell me that the answer is undefined. These aren't really answer choices, but it's just so I can see what your thinking is. Now, finding the slope between these points, when we did it by labeling, we can also do it just by counting squares. So what I did is I typed in the coordinates here, I switched them on, and you can click them on or off, and you can see the points disappear. You can click the label on and off as well, so you know where each point is. And then from here, I could count squares 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, up 6, across 2, and 6 divided by 2 is 3. And that's probably easier for most people than actually having to do it by the formula. The only problem with doing this is if you had very big numbers and they were a long way apart, you'd probably be more difficult to count the squares. But something that might be an idea for you, or if you're not sure what a coordinate looks like or where it goes, you can type these into Desmos as well, and that's a really helpful tool. What is the slope of this line? So I'm going to go ahead and type this in. I'm going to take a look at the picture, and I can see that it goes up 1, 2, 3, and then across 1. And 3 divided by 1 is 3. So sometimes the graphical representation is really helpful, as in case of you're not so good with the algebraic approach. But it's an extra one to think about. Then I'm going to let you guys have a try on some of these. So we'll have a look through the answers just so we can see. So I typed in this equation, and if we're not sure, we can just switch on each graph one at a time. And that one, you can see that it changes color as I'm doing it. You might just want to check the other ones as well, just to confirm that it's not those ones. And then we can see that it's this one. So in theory, you'd have to type in this question here, and then you'd have to type in each of the multiple choice answers if you were actually doing this properly. What is the slope of this line? So, well, I can see that it's negative slope. So let me see if it's negative 3/4. So down 1, 2, 3, and then over 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And we can see that's correct. Whereas negative 4/3 would be down 4, and then across 3, which doesn't take us to our line. So yes, the one that's negative 3/4 has the same slope. What is the intercept? We can just go ahead and click on it. And if we click on it twice, you can see that it's 8. So that one's pretty easy to confirm. And then this one actually asks you to type in Desmos which one is going to be the same. So you can go ahead and practice that skill that we just did. Type this in as the first question. If you wanted to, you could open up the Desmos app in a separate window, or you could actually just go back here and you can actually change these equations. You can type over the top of them if you want. You can put in whatever you like. And then the same thing, check for the x-intercepts. Check for y-intercepts as well. Sometimes they'll ask you the y-intercept as well. Just look where it crosses on the y-axis. What is the slope? By counting the squares. And that's pretty much it. A lot of these questions, it's just today is really just familiarizing yourself with Desmos, how to type in equations, what you're actually looking for, the idea that you can move around graphs, which I didn't really do too much of today here, but you can zoom in or you can zoom out. You can use your fingers just like you would on a phone to zoom in and zoom out. You can slide the graphs across. You can slide the graphs up and down. I just have a touch screen, which I'm using for that right now. And yeah, how to plot points and a few other things. There is another question that's also been assigned as well. So just check. Completion of this packet is 1 grade from class. And then the 2nd grade is from answering a question from Clever from the textbook on the big ideas. So you might want to go check that one out too. And that should do it, I think, for this lesson. I'm going to stop recording.